there, everybody. My name is Matt Ellis. I'll be your moderator for this next session. Very pleased to have you. We see that the clock is already ticking, so we're going to take full advantage of it and go ahead and get started. Today what we have is, I think, a really phenomenal presentation. This panel is going to be focused specifically on technology as it relates to sustainability. You're going to have one of the world's premier real estate organizations, Boston Properties, BXP, speak to this, who also so happens to be a widely acknowledged leader in sustainability and the use of technology in real estate. I can't believe I have to even say this, but my notes tell me I should. These guys are the dominant player in public REITs and workplace solutions, full stop. So you really do have some of the best minds in the industry here to share their thoughts and insights with you today. So guys, to get it going, what I'd like to do is turn to you, go ahead and do your own introductions as much as I wanted to. It's yours to do. Ben, we'll start with you.
Sure, thank you, Matt. My name is Ben Myers. I'm the head of sustainability at BXP. I've been at the company 13 years. I work very closely with this team. Also have worked with you, Matt, for a number of years on real-time energy monitoring and reporting. It's just a pleasure to be here today to talk more about BXP and how we have developed and how we're executing our sustainability program.
Great, thank you, Ben.
And Jim Whalen, I'm CTO, been with BXP for 26 years. I see my role as somewhat of an executive sponsor and at times just greasing the skids for Karen's success and Ben's success.
Karen Baker, Senior Vice President of Property Management. I lead the property management and engineering teams who play a huge role in executing our sustainability program.
Yeah, my name's Colin Joynt. I'm the CIO at BXP, and I partner with Jim, I partner with Ben, Karen, and all the other groups inside the organization as we're on this sustainability journey.
Great, thank you, Colin. Guys, what we're going to do is we're going to do two organizational summaries here. First and foremost, BXP, I'd love to invite you, Jim. Go ahead and give us a full view of BXP.
Sure, yes. BXP is a 54-year-old company. And we, in terms of the conversation today, I'll just kind of highlight a couple things that really provide context. We are the largest publicly traded owner, developer, manager of premier workspace, so critical mass, size, long-term ownership of our assets. The second is we are, our properties, our portfolio is in 6 dynamic gateway cities, markets in the country, 3 on the East Coast, 3 on the West Coast. But many of them with regulatory frameworks for how we operate in those environments, especially around sustainability. And the third is really our primary demographic of our client base is Fortune 100, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies who all have many of them have their own sustainability programs and objectives and initiatives. So when you look at our culture over the history of the company, we have this heritage, this historic heritage and commitment to customer service, to operational excellence that kind of ground our culture, Matt. And that's kind of a good framing for the conversation today. So,
and if I could just add to that, Jim, because we are decentralized, so again, when you're dealing with a regional issue or a regional set of requirements, the teams on the ground can really partner effectively with those regional leadership groups to deliver the solution. So it's a distributed model, which we've found to be very successful.
It's census building, influence. Yeah. Great point.
Jim, guys, I don't know if you said this already, just to make sure people are clear, this is a vertically integrated REIT, correct? And Jim, just to quickly, or someone, what does that mean? When I say you're vertically integrated, what does that mean? And what's the difference between the other option?
Well, we own and manage, we directly manage. We don't have third party. Karen has a whole team who executes day by day, all the way through our engineering, our security, operational teams on the ground here. So it's really, we don't have a third party management, for example. It's literally owning the customer and client relationships.
Yeah, I think you guys, when we talk today, I think you'll see, keep that in mind, because I do think you'll see that have some bearing on the degree of success they've had with technology and sustainability. In our experience, the vertically integrated model seems to be offering some real advantages here. So I hope it's something we can unpack and talk a bit about. For our part, if you don't already know Measurabl, the two things I want to communicate. One is we're incredibly fortunate to serve organizations like BXP. We've learned a lot. I still give Ben a hard time about the phone call I got 8 years ago, which was transformative for our company, and getting the chance to work with the best minds and most progressive organizations out there. That is what these guys also do, is they help not just Measurabl, but many of our peers in technology shape, evolve, and refine their products. And we've actually had that chance now for the better part of 8 years to do that with you guys. And it has led to these types of outcomes for us. We are now not just a sustainability data management solution for things that are as important as GRES, but I know that hopefully some of them are in the audience, but everything from utility data automation through to asset optimization, which is also a solution we'll get into, which is where we're doing things like real-time data management and on-demand carbon management. So that's across 93 countries, a few trillion in real estate asset value, all types of different properties. Workplace for sure is a major segment for us, but industrial, retail, cold storage, data center, and Major League Baseball stadiums are in there. So it's been a great privilege to serve, especially some of the leaders here in the space. We're going to turn not to technology, not yet at least. When we go out there as technologists and we make the presumption, which I think is false, that this all just happens because we gave you, right, Colin, a tool, that's not actually what occurs. So the way we want to start this session on technology is with people and with vision. So I'd like to go ahead and just ask, I think it's you, Ben, and certainly anybody else who'd like to weigh in, like, how did you guys achieve a culture rallied around sustainability up and down the value chain? How did you pull that off at the individual level, and what was the vision that did that?
Sure. So sustainability at BXP was never bolted on as a marketing or compliance initiative that was a knee-jerk reaction to the wind blowing, right? We're a long-term owner. We've always invested in the highest quality assets. Jim said premier workplace. We're always talking about premier workplace. So my job is to make sure sustainability is very much integrated into our organizational goals. It's how we define what premier is in many cases around energy efficiency, water conservation, emissions reductions, and waste management. So we were the first company in North America to establish a 1.5 degree science-based target. And if anybody's following the science here, it looks as though we're going to exceed 1.5 degrees this year, which is a scary prospect. We were also set out to achieve carbon neutral operations in 2025. That is not done in a silo. That is done with team member engagement at the asset level. And there are many leaders or perceived leaders in sustainability who have set organizational targets without going asset by asset and getting buy-in at the regional level and the property level to achieve those targets. And that's why we're seeing some companies walk back targets because they didn't come up with a plan. We've never done it that way. Every target that we have set that has been publicly disclosed in our filings has been set by doing a very thorough asset by asset analysis of what we can achieve. And I don't always hear the answers I want to hear when we have those meetings. I'll have property managers or engineers tell us, no, we can't do that, right? So it's about working with them very closely to get buy-in so that the things get done that need to get done over time. Right now, we're setting our 2030 targets. And I'll tell you, it's the third time we've done public target setting, and it's the hardest time to do public target setting because, as you know, a lot of the low-hanging fruit has been picked. So we're looking very closely at technology to bring it back to the subject of this conference and what we can achieve between now and 2030 with technology that's coming to market, like new building management systems, the promise of AI, right? Other investments we're making in heat recovery that are innovative and new, and we think there are going to be more opportunities there. High temperature heat pumps, which is a big area we're focused on. But just to round out the question here, Matt, I think it comes from sponsorship. It comes from sponsorship on the ground in the boiler room, right? It comes from sponsorship at a tone at the top with our CEO and president. We have a board level dedicated sustainability committee. So we like to say boardroom to boiler room. We have this sponsorship across the organization. And that's how we have developed our program. That's how we executed our program successfully is with that sponsorship and buy-in across the organization.
Yeah, the boiler room to boardroom is a classic BXP way of thinking. It's, just distills down the level of connectivity that they've achieved across the organization, from the property management function, facilities engineers, all the way through. I did try to claim credit for something similar and maybe you were first, but Measurabl thinks similarly, right? Meter to market is what we say. This notion that sustainability, technology, and connectivity really have to go from the most fundamental aspects of the portfolio and the business all the way through. And I just have to ask that question one more time about getting the buy-in and engagement. So sustainability as it relates to the overall needs of BXP, investor returns, superior tenant experience. Like, it didn't just happen, like you said, in a silo. Why do you think sustainability connects so directly to investor returns, right, and tenant experience? Jim, can you take that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I kind of provided context for who we are and where we operate in the market. And it does come back to ultimately investors. Like, we're a public company, and we have to perform at a level, and we operate at that premier sector or segment of the market. So again, I think it's just all part of the fabric of who we are, who we're servicing. And I know for Karen, like, it's, she's got a New York client base that she's got to service, right? So even regionalizing it, there's a whole dynamic in New York versus San Francisco versus Boston that we play out here. So
let's go to New York, Karen, on that, and take this down from kind of theory to practice. So when we think about creating value in real estate, a lot of that value is right down there at the asset level, right? There's no more challenging market than New York, I think, to work in. The regulation, the customer and tenant expectations, the level of competition, new buildings, high-performing buildings, obviously built to green standards and tech-enabled. So I'd love to know, like, when you look at this market, how do you use sustainability as a lever to succeed?
Well, I think a great indicator of our success in doing that is our leased occupancy of our assets. We're overall Manhattan, there's about we're at 91% leased, and across the board, all of Manhattan, there's about a 20% accessibility. So we are outperforming our competitors, and we truly believe that that's the operation of a premier workplace, and that sustainability is a big piece of that, and how we execute our programs, how we manage our buildings very efficiently, and a lot of the sustainability programs that we have executed actually affect the bottom line. So it's not only shareholder returns, it's actually cost effective for our clients. So they really work hand in hand. There's a flight to quality going on in the market, and we have definitely benefited from that flight to quality.
Yeah, building off of what Karen just said, I agree wholeheartedly. These energy conservation measures that we've implemented save around $50 million of annually recurring energy-related expenses. So we can, just that alone justifies the sustainability work we do. Our investors want to understand that there's sound financial business cases behind what we're doing, and we can show that over 200 measures, we have about a 3.7-year payback period. So we have great data on the returns that we're getting from efficiency investments. Added on to that, a lot of investors, because that was your question, are really concerned about protecting asset value in an era where there's more discerning clients out there looking for space that's efficient and low carbon. We have regulations here in New York, as I'm sure most of this audience, if not all of this audience is aware of, with Local Law 97, where there are real carbon fines and penalties coming at buildings. And because we've been proactive in anticipating stakeholder demand on sustainability, our buildings are in a great position to avoid fines and penalties under Local Law 97, not just the first compliance period, where I expect 80% of New York's building stock will be compliant, but the second compliance period, where a much, much smaller share is going to be compliant. So we are making ourselves more future-proof, if you will, with these investments that we're making, and being proactive about this wager we're making on the value of sustainability to not only our clients, but also our investors.
And so given these trends, right, you guys are clearly saying, look, it's the investor expectation, certainly in markets like New York, very clearly the tenant expectation. We got to operationalize that, right? So the question is, I think, going to go over to you, Colin. You guys are well known for your commitments, which you shared, public commitments, ambitious commitments Then there's the reality of delivering that thing.
Yep.
Can you talk about like how did you do that through granular data, systems, building subsystems and metering? What was the infrastructure and the strategy that put you in a position to succeed in a market like New York?
Well, I think you've got to take a step back. So it gets back to the thoughtfulness that we leverage at BXP for everything we do. And that thoughtfulness starts at what is our end goal and how are we trying to get there? Like, we can't just arbitrarily say, oh, we're going to pick platform A or platform B and it's going to solve all of your problems. It needs to be thoughtful. So what we do to supplement and augment the data is we provide that stewardship, we provide that sponsorship, and really having the meaningful and tough questions around what are we trying to achieve. You take that approach, layer it on top of and I'm going to ask Jim to help on this one, the volume of data that we have within our environment to deliver that solution, which allows Ben and Karen to have that visibility, which ultimately drives the bottom line.
I mean, if we go back, I mean, I have to date myself, like 2013, I think was our first GRES filing. And it was, it was a mess. I could use much stronger language where, it was heavily manual, no kind of confidence in the quality of the data. And what we wound up doing is going on this journey of rationalizing the data flows based on our invoice data, then requiring universal pulse meters at every asset, at least one, if not multiple, and creating a floor of data that we could measure ourselves with. And then went on a journey. That's where we inserted you, Matt, and partnered with you and inserting Measurabl into that stack, and getting to a point where Ben's team is a small team. You're a small team, Ben. Can file with complete confidence on time. And what that has allowed us to do is create a data platform for being responsive to all the other reporting requirements that are compliance-driven, investor-driven, internally driven, to be able to be responsive. So it's like that journey is like, again, a partnership of disciplines to make that and make that happen.
Yeah, I'd say vertical integration helped in that case as well with data collection. We were able to work with property management, we were able to work with engineering and gather data where a lot of companies have gotten stuck on data collection. And I was with an industrial company yesterday where they only have access to 10% of their energy data. And that's not uncommon. And it's a bit mystifying to me in 2024 that we don't have real-time pulse meter output on every energy meter in our buildings. I mean, it seems like a base level requirement.
Right now, every industrial owner is looking at you office guys and saying, only an office would say something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's tough out there depending on the asset class you work in. Retail or industrial don't have the same level of control over their spaces that an office environment might enjoy. But I do agree with you that that's not a technology barrier, that's a cultural and a business barrier. Were you guys ever surprised? So you talked about we need to be more responsive to investor demands a la GRES, so we began to work on our data. Were you ever surprised about when you got there, what else you could do with it? Or do you feel like you always knew, Colin, where you were going?
No, it's yours.
Whenever you go on a data journey, it's iterative, it has unexpected consequences, but it's always a positive end game, Matt. I'm just like,
yeah.
So I always, whenever we do a business case on a data investment, we don't know exactly, we haven't defined everything on the journey, but it's an investment because data reveals itself over time in an iterative way, separate from the demands you have on it.
And I can think, like, and imagine whatever adverse market circumstances come our way, I'm guessing you guys were incrementally better off at dealing with that. So for example, the pandemic hits and indoor air quality becomes relevant because we need to get that tenant to feel comfortable returning to the building. But you already had the systems and infrastructure to be responsive to that. Do you think is that a true statement, that your position in data gave you agility in responding to market downturns?
I would just say we pivoted to data as a competitive advantage 15 years ago. And so building organizational capabilities that we could apply to energy. We're sitting on now a cache of 107 million card swipe records for occupancy that we started building in 2018 that provides the ability to optimize our operations to provide insights and predictive analysis on leasing or our clients' leasing decisions with us. So really providing, again, this data as a competitive advantage is part of our DNA. I mean, Colin says his observation is like the data is like a DNA here, driven, and it's very driven from the top.
Yeah.
So
one microcosm example is what we did at 140 Kendrick Street in Needham, Massachusetts, where we had real-time interval data going back historically from the Measurabl platform, and we were able to plan and execute a complete net zero conversion, adding on-site renewables and energy storage, which the energy storage is actually dispatched during peak hours, like 3 to 8 p.m. The utility calls on that, so we have real load flexibility. We can also see 24/7 carbon emissions now, and we know how the building's performing. We tightened the building up. We did R30 walls, R40 roof. We tightened and sealed all the windows. We put in a new heat recovery system, fully electrified the asset. We made all this investment in the envelope and the mechanical systems, put the building in service, and we're looking at this net zero dashboard we created together. And the building's not hitting the energy performance targets we wanted. And we could see it day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute, what was happening. And we worked very closely with our engineering team to tune the asset. And we were able to squeeze out another 15 to 20% energy improvement just through the operational team engagement, right? So you can build a terrific LEED Platinum building, place it in service, and it performs very poorly unless there's a continuous engagement of the team and an acknowledgement and understanding of what the goals for that asset performance are.
Yeah, very nice. And you mentioned the GM building earlier. So I want to just make sure, let's knock out a myth, right? I worry that people look at BXP and say, they're so well resourced, they have the best assets, not by accident, but because they chose them. This is something that I can't really do. And I want to go back to like GM, and you think of kind of these older iconic assets. You mentioned a 50% cut in energy intensity there, right? Like, was that beyond the reach of a normal owner? We're talking about this backstage. Is this something other people can do, and is this an example of that?
Karen, you want to talk a little bit about GM?
Yeah,
why don't you go to the next slide too? It's just
Next slide.
Data points. So
I don't want to steal your thunder, Karen.
Okay. So for the GM building, a trophy iconic asset for BXP, 50 years plus old. We used a number of approaches as to how we were able to reduce our EUI in this building. Number one was using a platform like Measurabl, Matt. So that was very, very key to our success in driving our reduced EUI. We did a third-party retro commissioning where they came in and studied the building and made sure that we were operating, and this is in accordance with Local Law 87, but made sure that we were operating as the building was designed to operate. And then we did the chiller plant electrification, and that completed summer of 23. That reduced our EUI from 115 to 70. We got our first Energy Star in the history of the building, which was very exciting for the team. And we are avoiding $3 million of costs a year. So not only did we meet our sustainability goal, but we were able to avoid costs. Steam in New York is rising 12.5% a year. Electric delivery is rising 5% every year. So the ability to avoid those rate increases that we can't control, really, this particular project really demonstrates that. It was about a 4.5-year payback on the capital investment. So a win-win all around.
We've got a slide for all the awards. I feel like we should pull it up now.
Oh,
but
I'm sorry, did I go over my boundaries?
And by the way, on the point of can other people do this, but you mentioned our particular role in that's great, but a lot of what I'm hearing you talk about is very accessible technology. Is that a true statement?
yeah, and I would also say we layered on here Nantum is some additional real-time monitoring and some occupancy correlated to occupancy. So there's a couple of tools here that have got not just the chiller, the chiller modernization that Karen, but there's also tools that we added beyond Measurabl to really empower the team.
Yes.
So
Several initiatives have been layered over each other to make this reduction happen. When we acquired this building and we were doing the benchmarking, it always stuck out as a sore thumb, right? It has the intensity of a life science asset at 140, and the fact that we've cut it in half is remarkable. But it's because we started with the chiller plant modernization, and it's because we envisioned that, and then we developed a retro commissioning program. It wasn't just retro commissioning of this building, but between this year and last year, we will have retro commissioned 30% of our actively managed office portfolio in San Francisco, in Boston, in New York, in Cambridge. And that's a program that we rolled out with engineering leadership and our engineering leadership working group, because we had the cohesive group meeting regularly on other issues. We use it as an opportunity to build this retro commissioning program. And through retro commissioning, we're also looking at electrification and net zero and starting to ballpark costs and methods of electrifying, maybe not the entire building, but portions of the building to bring down carbon emissions in a cost-effective manner. So it's been a really great program that I think gets back to some of Jim's points on working together with the engineering team.
Yeah. I got to prompt you now, because this is another great Benism, but it's something like build it right, build it tight. Can you?
Yeah. Build tight, ventilate right, energize with something.
There it is. Okay, nice.
That's the net zero playbook. It's pretty simple.
It is simple, and here's a great example.
It rhymes, so leasing remembers it, right?
So now I have to make all mine
brokers
rhyme.
to be able to say it and repeat it. So they like rhymes, so they like things in threes.
Wait, did you just say you want brokers to be able to repeat things? And
I want brokers to be talking about net zero, yes.
all right.
If I could just interject, we keep hearing the engineering team, the property management team, the people coming up over and over again. And I think that they are really the tools that they're given, Measurabl, Nantum, capital that we pour in. But at the end of the day, you see a lot of people standing there. And it's giving our teams a direct line of sight to the goals and vision of the organization. And having them understand the impact and the value that they add every day, no matter how small it might be, from the maintenance tech to the senior property manager. And that is what is, I believe, is what really drives our platform. And we do a quarterly property management engineering town hall. We have various speakers come, like Ben and Jim and Colin, as well as our director of engineering, who we call out and we reward and acknowledge the excellence by which we're operating. And I think that, rewarding people, showing them what others are doing also within the portfolio and across the country has been very powerful in our ability to drive our sustainability platform.
Celebrating, acknowledging the outcomes is a great way to develop the culture. I'm going to go a little off script with that then and go to you, Colin, but that's not easy. And making data and technology accessible and comfortable and useful to your frontline folks, is there any tips, tricks, things that you've particularly done to foster that in BXP?
So I think the biggest thing that we do is you can use the old cliche of fail forward, right? So take a set of data, model it, see what works. It may not work. So, back to Ben's example of, with 140, it's you tune the building starts to tell you, these are some of the areas that I need to really focus on. If you don't have the wherewithal and at some level the courage to throw an idea on the table, nothing's going to ever move the needle. So you encourage that comfort zone of here's what we have, and encourage creativity, encourage that ability to fail forward. The next piece is throw technology in there in a measured and meaningful way. So we're embarking on AI. No one's talked about AI yet, so I'll be the guy to break the ice. So we have 9 cohort groups inside of BXP across functions and functional areas and geography to learn. So on the sustainability team, we're learning what is one of their end goals? One of their end goals is to use AI to augment their team, to improve and streamline the amount of time it takes to infer or plot trends in their data. So what does that do? Does that allow Ben to be more nimble? Does it allow Karen's team to say, hey, we've got an issue at, on Park, so we've got to go tune something? Like, we're all in this together. And that's back to this thoughtfulness, the DNA of BXP, which is boardroom to boiler room. We are in this together. We're going to leverage AI. We're going to see what works. We encourage people to experiment, be curious. We don't have all the answers, and we want to share. It becomes very collaborative.
Is one of the questions you guys are trying to solve with data, technology, what is good? What does a good asset look like? How do we know we're on track here? Do we benchmark? Do we benchmark relative to our own assets? Do we benchmark relative to other REITs? How do you know we're on the right track?
Sure, that's my question.
Yeah.
So we use a variety of data sets. So we benchmark against our own assets because we have more granular data on occupancy, which is an important factor.
Internal competitive.
Right, and then we benchmark on the regional level, and then we benchmark against CBEX, right, the data set, and we'll benchmark against the publicly available data sets from energy disclosure regulations. So we have publicly available asset level data in Boston, in New York, in Cambridge, in San Francisco. So we can go to those data sets and figure out how our assets are performing versus others. But mostly we're trying to benchmark versus ourselves and our past performance, targeting reductions that we can do cost effectively over time. So we'll look at tenant role in a building as an opportunity for renewal and redevelopment, and with the turn of space, you have an opportunity to upgrade mechanical systems within tenant spaces. So we use that as another factor for how and when we can address certain performance deficiencies.
Are there other benchmarks that are sort of like zeros and ones, binaries, where things that you can do that your peers cannot? For example, I'm even thinking of green bond issuance now. What other mechanisms have you tapped into that you think are hallmarks of your ability to outperform relative to?
I would point to the JV partnerships with Norges, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. They would call themselves activists. They are wanting to make a positive impact with their real estate investment activity here in the U.S. We enjoy a very strong relationship with the Norges team, and I think that's because of the platform we bring as a partner to a group like Norges that wants to be have a partner that cares about operational excellence and wants to place in service buildings that are going to retain their value over the long term.
The other examples come to mind that you think you're getting outperformance or incremental advantage? We talked, like, do you see it in this share price? So we can do bond issuance, we can get an LP investor like Norges.
I'll point out one more example. When you look at our outstanding shares, nearly 10% of them are held by green ESG dedicated funds. So we're attracting pools of investors. That's very significant. So the theory is you'll have a lower cost of capital over time if you're attracting more of these funds that are screening out, underperforming real estate portfolios. So how are they doing that screening is a common question, right? What are they looking at? And we're trying to calibrate off of our investors all the time, meeting with them. What do you care about? What do you want to see? And I think that really speaks to anticipating and reacting to stakeholder demand. And I think our company is especially good at doing. It's one of the reasons we've been a leader, is because we know where the ball is going, so to speak, with many of our investors, with many of our clients, and we're serving them.
In sustainability, in technology, we want to keep seeing, like, where does it show up, like in the share price, in the actual asset value, in the cost of capital, loan, access to. And another example is, so as a publicly traded entity, BXP is in what's called the FTSE EPRA Nareit index, which is hosted by the London Stock Exchange Group. And that's a way for institutional investors to deploy dollars into public companies. They have a sister index, which is a green index. We provide the data. it tilts the organization's green. And the goal there is to be overweight proportionally. And then again, more capital flows into your shares. BXP here wins again, right? Because they position within that index by virtue of their sustainability credentials. So yes, it does show up. I think we're going to move on, guys. We're coming down to the last few minutes. If you guys have questions, this is a chance to get one and try to get a mic. I'm going to go ahead and, guys, bring us home by just getting around the table and asking each of you for a closeout comment on what's next. Sustainability, technology, and outperformance. For you in your mind, what can you leave the audience with? What's next? Ben?
I think continuing to be ambitious in 2025, 2026, with so much going on in the world, so much going on politically, and staying focused on sustainability is going to be a challenge. I think it's going to be a challenge for, we were talking about this earlier, with many public companies and what commitments they've made, staying true to those commitments and continuing to push. I feel like we're at a very pivotal time. I think what we say and do over the next 12 months is going to be extremely important. And, you know, frankly, I'm focused on the tactical stuff, like our 2030 targets. I'm focused on setting those targets. I'm focused on renewable energy procurement, doing more additionality contracting for new capacity. I'm focused on grid modernization, how cities are going to adapt to rapidly electrifying heating loads, EV loads, and of course, generative AI, which is the elephant in the room. And working with cities like Boston that want to make sure they're adding the 5 substations they need by 2030 to accommodate a more electrified future. So that's going to be a major focus of ours over the next 12 months as well. You know, the list goes on,
Sure.
But I'll leave it there.
Ben has a long list.
Yeah.
All right, Jim, Karen, Colin, what's next?
So my focus is on building performance. We spun up out of the engineering leadership that Ben referred to, this forum that we've created, a building performance working group, and it's what's the next set of tools to get the incremental gains that we need, maybe not at every asset, but at strategic assets around and really this journey that the industry is on to introduce more automation into building systems, which is a tough slog. It is a tough slog, but it's innovation that the industry needs to face up to, and we're going to be on that road, and we're going to be leading that. So,
no. Karen?
For myself and for my team and working with the corporate team here, it's really about looking at sort of the next generation of how we continue to grow our sustainability program. And I think about how my team has to approach capital expenditures over the next 5 to 10 years, partnering with Jim and Colin and Ben in looking at a project that comes to mind is 601 Lexington. We have the Empire Building Challenge. We were awarded for that with NYSERDA, and we will be executing in next year the heat recovery program in that building, which is going to offset our steam consumption by 30% using recovered heat, condensed water heat for the perimeter heating. So looking out into the future at projects like that and what that next tier is. I will add that one's a little bit outside of what we typically look at for a payback. So typically we're under 5 years. This is a little bit over that, but having to accept that sometimes, you know, as Ben said earlier, we got the low-hanging fruit. Now it's sort of that next tier that's going to take a little more creativity, a little more vision, and a lot of support from our leadership, which we do have.
Yes. Colin?
I think it's the balance. So we all talk about AI and generative AI and what's it going to do, but then let's also look at what is it going to do in terms of data centers, in terms of power, in terms of consumption, and does that work contra to what we're trying to do around sustainability? So we have to factor that into our technical decisions as well. We're very fortunate. The 6 cities that we are predominantly focused in have great educational bodies. You know, I can rhyme them. You got MIT, you've got Stanford, UCLA, et cetera. The list goes on. Our friends here in New York, like Columbia, tap into those. learn what are they doing, what are they seeing, so we can bring those ideas back into our organization and continually learn, continually explore and challenge, and just keep building. As Jim said, we've got data from 2008. We've got badge swipes that we started in 18. We start modernizing our BMS systems. How much more data are we going to have, and what does that now look like to make it actionable? That's the excitement for me. It's pulling it all together and delivering.
It's an exciting future. And guys, to close out and see if the organizers will let us take a question or two, the final thing to say is, like, keep talking about this, right? When we opened up the session, we said, hey, we have a leader in sustainability and technology, real estate, here for you today. Another thing that makes these guys leaders is that they do this. They just gave you a bunch of really practical and precise answers on how they've achieved their success. So keep doing it. We want to thank you guys for it. We'll go out to the audience, 1 or 2 questions here, this gentleman in the front, and thank you guys.
Thank you very much for sharing all that. Quite interesting and very impressive. My question is, how are the tenants experiencing the difference with regard to the use of their space? Just to repeat that question.
So the question is, how are the tenants experiencing the difference of this work in sustainability and technology in the use of your products in space? How do they see it?
It vary asset by asset and tenant by tenant, depending on what they're looking for. I mean, clearly there are elements of healthy buildings that impact tenant experience related to air quality, right? So we know from Dr. Joe Allen, cognitive function is a major focus of his, with the doubling of cognitive function with better ventilation rates. Our IAQ monitoring program is helping us assure that those ventilation rates are being met to improve air quality. So I'd say air quality is a big one. Another one too is they should see it in their utility expenses. We're controlling escalation better because we're investing in central plants that do heating and cooling more efficiently. So they may not be seeing it, but they're certainly experiencing it through their operating expenses. And third, I think, a lot of our tenants don't want the reputational risk of being in buildings that are being penalized for carbon performance. So their brand and reputation matters. And real estate and the real estate decisions they're making may be one of the most tangible expressions of their sustainability values, right? It's there, it's where they live, it's where they bring their clients and customers and where their employees work. And they want it to embody their values around ESG and sustainability.
I think this is a chance that we have to share something that I think is incredibly exciting on the tenant experience side that isn't itself a technology thing, and it's what you've done with Wellington. Right? Can you share with the audience, what is that lease arrangement you've done there with Wellington?
There's a net zero lease where there was a schedule of work, delineation of work between us and Wellington, where there were requirements around lighting, power density, plug load, operating hours for their actual operations. So they're having to operate to hit certain energy intensity targets for their own space. And then we made a variety of commitments associated with base building mechanical systems and envelope improvements, on-site renewable energy development. So we're producing about 40% more energy on site than the building's consuming. And we're doing that with about 1.4 megawatts of power. And we're showing them in real time with a dashboard, the one we built with Measurabl, real time carbon emissions at the building based on the grid emissions factor and the solar output and the storage performance. And so they can see exactly in real time whether they're exporting the grid, whether they're consuming the energy in the building, and how that relates to their carbon emissions footprint.
This is a suburban asset, and we'd love to replicate. It was a unique partnership with Wellington.
Correct.
So that's, talk about tenant experience, I mean, right down to the lease structure, right, and realigning on value, risk, reward. It's what these guys are doing. No one's throwing us off stage yet, so we'll do one more, sir, if you don't mind.
On? There we go. You just mentioned a suburban asset, and I'm from New Jersey, so I know you guys like to pretend that you don't own a campus in Princeton, but you do. So I'm wondering, when is the juice ever going to be worth the squeeze to roll out this, what you're talking about in suburban markets like Princeton?
Well,
when does that happen?
Yeah,
What does it look like?
I spent 2 years of my professional career developing 5.2 megawatts of solar there that we can talk about after this. But those solar canopies that you may see at Princeton are definitely have my fingers.
I think it was one of the pictures earlier.
Yeah, that's right.
Pictures earlier.
You know, we're doing a lot there. We're looking at ground source heat pumps right now. You know, the suburban assets are a great sandbox because you have land. You can do things that are experimental. One thing we can say about that campus, it's 100% electric, so it's fully electrified already, which helps our sustainability performance. But it was using a lot of water for irrigation, and we've dramatically reduced the irrigation there with smart sensors and smarter irrigation practices. So we treat those buildings just like an urban asset. We're doing the same benchmarking. They get the same attention and love. We've got some vacancy there we're addressing, and we're looking at repositioning a la 140 Kendrick Street in Needham, trying to make those buildings also much more efficient through the lease up. And we have clients that are looking at buildings that want to be in a LEED Gold, LEED Platinum certified building. So Carnegie Center is getting a lot of attention from our team.
Guys, we'll hold it there. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, BXP.
All right.